Sometimes it is not the book that finds you, it is you who finds the book. I think it was Socrates who said that, and it's certainly true of me the past month, because I've acquired a lot of new books. There are always a few I'm looking out for, a few on my list, and I have managed to track down a couple vintage hardcovers that I've been on the lookout for of a certain vampire series. So maybe I'll show you that later on. But I also last week stumbled into my local Savers, already, immediately overstimulated by the fluorescent lighting, the children screaming, the Christmas music. I took my usual route, said hi to the creepy dolls, checked out just how dirty a pan they put out this week, and went to the bookshelf and discovered that it seems a local literary baddie has died. R.I.P. But you know what they say, one literary baddie's trash is another literary baddie's treasure. I think that was also Socrates. And from the grimy, dusty, sticky shelves, I just pulled book after book that I have been wanting to read. It was euphoric. And alongside my secondhand book haul, it has been the time of year where I get my Christmas book voucher. The bookshop I work at, the owner gives us all vouchers to the shop, which might sound a bit frugal, but we love it. We all look forward to it because with our staff discount, the voucher can go a long way, and I cleared out my staff holds. I don't even really remember what is in this big bag. I think there are some 2025 releases in here, some ARCs as well. Ooh, okay. So we'll discover it together because, oh yeah, this is a book haul. Duh. How else can I justify this to myself? Although I do probably need to make a disclaimer because it's the internet. Is it normal to buy this amount of books? Probably not, but unfortunately I am both a maximalist and a hedonist. Me want book, me buy book. Ooga booga. Disclaimer over. Okay. Okay, I've just dropped that whole pile on the floor. So I think we're going to start with the mystery bag. Okay, I'm going to do like little pile by little pile. Ooh, Eurotrash by Kristen Cracked. This is one I requested from the publishers. It's non-fiction, which is strange because I don't really read non-fiction, but listen to this. Realizing he and she are the very worst kinds of people, a middle-aged man embarks on a dubious road trip through Switzerland with his 80-year-old mother, recently discharged from a mental institution. Traversing the country in a hired cab, they attempt to give away the wealth she has amassed from investing in the arms industry, but a fortune of such immensity is surprisingly hard to squander. Then I have, try not to dox myself, Luna Park by Bret Easton Ellis. Imagine being Bret Easton Ellis, you become a famous best-selling novelist while still in college, then see your insufferable, abusive father reduced to a bag of ashes in a safety deposit box, even as your own celebrity drowns in a sea of vilification, booze, and drugs. So, I've been on a bit of a Bret Easton Ellis binge this year. I was reading Rules of Attraction and I put it down, but in the new year, I'm definitely going to pick it back up as I do want to read all of his work. I just find him to be such an interesting author. Interesting and scary. Macunaíma, which is a Brazilian classic, newly translated, I believe. It's in this gorgeous Fitzcarraldo edition. They're gorgeous editions, but the more you read them, the more the blue fades, which I actually quite like. Like you can see your fingerprints on the books where you've handled it. I think that's quite special. This landmark novel from 1928 has been hugely influential. It follows the adventures of the shape-shifting Macunaíma and his brothers as they leave their home in the northern Amazon for a whirlwind tour of Brazil, cramming 4 centuries and a continental expanse into a single mythical plain. I know it's been compared to 100 Years of Solitude, which is why I took interest in it, because I love magical realism. Having lost a magical amulet, the hero and his brother journey to Sao Paulo to retrieve the talisman that has fallen into the hands of an Italo-Peruvian captain of industry, who is also a cannibal giant. Written over 6 delirious days, the fruit of years of study, Macunaíma magically synthesizes dialect, folklore, anthropology, mythology, flora, fauna, and pop culture to examine Brazilian identity. I have to say, out of all of the fiction I've read, Central South American Latinx writing really tends to be just like stand out. So excited for that. That may be a like mid-year at my parents' uni break read, because it's oh, it's not even that many pages, but I feel like it'll require some concentration. Within the Walls by Giorgio Bassani. Giorgio Bassani was an Italian writer, and a lot of his stories and novels are interwoven. They're all set in the same Italian city of Ferrara, and they follow the lives of the different characters, which obviously interconnect, and I really want to get stuck into this well. Bassani's novels and stories are among the most haunting portrayals of time and place ever written. The first in the series, the novel of Ferrara, conjures up brief lives with brilliant intensity: a young woman abandoned by her lover, a girl captured in a faded photograph, a Holocaust survivor seemingly back from the dead, the death of a heroine, a silent witness to the city's first wartime atrocity. Giving life to the characters that would shape his work, these award-winning stories show Bassani as one of the finest writers of his time. So this is a short story collection. I thought it was a novel. But that's more appealing to me, a short story collection. Now I really have books everywhere. This may actually not have been the best way to go about it. That's all right. That's all right. Jean Rhys Voyager in the Dark. I read Good Morning Midnight by Jean Rhys this year and was absolutely blown away by it. I do want to read Wide Sargasso Sea next year. A wonderful, bittersweet book written with disarming simplicity. Anna is 18 years old and catapulted to England from the West Indies. After the death of her beloved father, working as a chorus girl, Anna drifts into the demi-monde of Edwardian London. But there, dismayed by the unfamiliar cold and greyness, she is absolutely alone and unconsciously floating from innocence to harsh experience. That actually sounds a little bit like Lucy, which I recommended in my last video. I'm quite interested in Caribbean writers. If anyone has recommendations, please, because Caribbean writers, I will buy a book purely just because of where the author's from. It's one of the only places. Caribbean and Irish writers, those are the two regions. I will just pick up a book solely because of where the author is from. Then we have Fear and Trembling by Soren Kierkegaard. I actually have like a gut recoil to philosophy, which is probably a lot to do with the men I've dealt with in the past who are into philosophy, but alas, a really talented, cool writer in my creative writing class was talking about Fear and Trembling and Kierkegaard in general and being inspired in their piece. And then my friend read this and was telling me about The Night of Infinite Resignation, and I was like, that's so me when I blunder and Queen captures my knight. And maybe this will be it. I don't really read much philosophy, well, unless it is supporting a point I'm trying to make in a literary essay, which I really don't think is the way philosophy is meant to be engaged with. Kierkegaard expounds his personal view of religion through the scene in Genesis in which Abraham prepares to kill his son at God's command. He believed Abraham's unreserved obedience to be the essential leap of faith needed to make a full commitment to his religion. So this informed all his later writings and was hugely influential for both Protestant theology and the existentialist movement. This is a little bit of my issue with a lot of philosophical writing, is it relies on biblical examples and references, and I had an atheist upbringing, so a lot of it goes over my head and feels like extra work I have to do. Again, I should probably do the extra work if I want to engage fully with these concepts, but sometimes I get lazy. Super dramatic cover. Damn. But maybe this will give me some ideas, because I've been pondering my own philosophical thoughts, thinking of doing my own little manifesto. I was eating breakfast the other day and I looked down at my eggs and I thought, where did this come from? A chicken. But where does the chicken come from? The egg. But then where does the egg come from? The chicken. But then where does the chicken come from? The egg. And then where does the egg come from? Well, the chicken. But then where does the chicken come from? The egg. Where does the egg come from? The chicken. But then the chicken, it has to come from the egg. But then the egg has to come... Cat poems. That's more like it. Shall I read you one? Okay. Ezra Pound, Tame Cat. It rests me to be among beautiful women. Why should one always lie about such matters? I repeat, it rests me to converse with beautiful women, even though we talk nothing but nonsense. The purring of the invisible antennae is both stimulating and delightful. Same, bro. Same. Literally just poems about cats from the world's greatest poets. So, and then I have something that really was a little splurge. It is the Harper Muse Painted Classic edition of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I love these editions. They are beautiful. So they're all painted and the brush strokes are embossed. They have gold pages. And look inside. It's just, I find the attention to detail on these so nice. And as far as I can tell, they're not fully glue bound. They seem sewn, which is always preferable. Unlike certain Penguin series, cloth bound classics that fall apart in 2 seconds because they're so cheaply bound. They're just glued together. Might as well be with PVA. I bought it for myself after I handed in my final assignment for my creative writing class, and it was a short story that I'd written and didn't realize until like third or fourth editing draft that it was inspired by Frankenstein. I hadn't clocked it, even though there's a lot of storm, a lot of pathetic fallacy, a lot of galvanization. When I handed in my Jane Eyre essay mid-year, I bought the Jane Eyre version of this, and so I thought, why not buy Frankenstein? A nice little tradition, and they're gonna look so beautiful together on my shelf. Ooh, I love them. Oh, and then I have Penance by Eliza Clark, which my coworker is lending to me. So this is actually just a loan, but I'm halfway through the audiobook and I'm not liking the audiobook narration. So I mentioned that and she was like, oh, I have a copy, I'll lend it to you, which is very sweet. So actually, hopefully I can finish this soon because it's a really intriguing concept. It tackles the ethics of true crime and who gets their story told. Nearly a decade after the horrifying murder of a 16-year-old Joan Wilson in a seaside town, journalist Alex C. Corelli has written the definitive account of the crime. Do you know what happened already? Do you know her? Did you see it on the internet? Did you listen to a podcast? Did the host make jokes? The only question is how much of the story is true. Looking forward to continuing with it. My little new arrivals shelf. So a few of these I've picked up really recently. Oh, The Group, which is coming out next year, I believe. What would you do?
When you're okay, so he said yes would go. I don't know what you mean there, babes. Grimsby, hello!
When Hannah moves to Spain from an internship at a prestigious Prado gallery, she finds herself spending her days buried in the museum's stifling archives and her nights alone in a tiny rented flat. Then one day she sees them, Tom, Samuel and Leah. Glamorous and elegant, they are also foreigners in the city. But unlike her, they are fabulously wealthy, their lives an endless whirl of creativity and hedonism. And when Hannah discovers an uncatalogued 17th century etching in the archive, she makes a decision which changes everything. Ooh, desirable friendship group. I'm sure it'll get very messy, from the sultry streets of Madrid to the gleaming world of Mediterranean luxury villas. I think this one's only recently been translated from Swedish. Oh yeah, January 2025. So this is an advanced copy, published January 2025. Sounds freaking good. Okay, now I guess it's time to pick up all the books that fell on my floor. Here I go. Okay, so I just realized the candles kind of look like little horns. That's awesome. Okay, all of these were from the same secondhand store, and oh, I'll start with this one, Vladimir Julia May Jones. I posted about this little haul on TikTok and I got a few comments saying that this is bad. It's like a reverse Lolita apparently. One evening, a 50-something literature professor invites her new and beautiful young colleague Vladimir to join her for a drink. I just don't know if I can do literary fiction age gap. For a period there, I felt like every book I picked up was literary fiction age gap or a throuple. And I just don't know if I have the patience, well and truly. I am a fan of Lolita, but I'm very wary of books described as Lolita-esque. Then I have a basic Penguin Black classic, Three Poets of the First World War, Evil Gurney, Isaac Rosenberg, and Wilfred Owen. Wilfred Owen has a very special place in mine and my friend's lore. During high school, we studied his poetry and very earnestly, unironically, we loved his writing. But then we went on to discover a bunch of fan fiction and fan art that was Wilfred Owen x Siegfried Sassoon. And you know, I just read In Memoriam by Alice Wynne, which actually prompted me to buy this because I fully believe that is Wilfred Owen Harry Potter fan fiction. And I will not be elaborating on that any further, maybe in one of my wrap-ups. My coworkers and I were just gazing at the shelves of books the other day, trying to estimate how much of modern contemporary fiction is Harry Potter fan fiction. And I think it's a great deal. I would say like 60%. Maybe that's a bit high, but if you count the romance genre, damn. Flames by Robbie Arnott. I read this quite a few years ago and it's Tasmanian magical realism. It's so unique, it's so beautiful. His writing reminds me a lot of Max Porter's. A young man named Levi McAllister decides to build a coffin for his sister Charlotte, who promptly runs for her life. A water rat swims upriver in quest of the cloud god. A fisherman hunts for tuna in partnership with a seal, and a father takes form from fire. Tasmanian magical realism. I remember it being incredible. I already have a copy, but I definitely want to gift this to someone. Ah, and look at the beautiful cover. Catherine Mansfield, Bliss and Other Stories. I read a few of Catherine Mansfield's stories for my creative writing classes and have always really enjoyed them. I don't know too much about her or her writing, but in the realm of the short story, Catherine Mansfield establishes a highly original style, undramatic, the plot kept to a minimum. Her writing is exquisitely subtle in its treatment of human behaviour and lyrical to the verge of poetry. There's a great quote on the back from Virginia Woolf. I was jealous of her writing, the only writing I've ever been jealous of. Probably we had something in common which I shall never find in anyone else. That isn't an endorsement. I do remember all of the stories of hers I've read quite vividly. And I just happened upon one of my favorite books of all time, Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid, in this older edition, which I don't think is in print anymore. If you don't know, Annie John follows a girl growing up on the island of Antigua. She turns 12 and her mother begins to treat her differently. And it's all about their relationship and growing older, and colonial identity. And Jamaica Kincaid is one of my favorite writers of all time. I can't recommend her books enough, and I'm super excited to give this to someone. A collection of short stories called Drowned by Juno Diaz, who was from the Dominican Republic, I believe. Yeah. Writes about the Dominican Republic to the struggling urban communities of New Jersey. Juno Diaz is one of those authors that I've just heard in passing so many times and read about in literary essays, and just seems to be referenced by a lot of writers I'm a fan of. So I don't know too much about what his writing entails. I don't think I've read much from the Dominican Republic. Oh, I can also see when this book was initially bought. It has the original sticker on the back, 1985. So that's always fun. I always enjoy seeing that. The Death of Vivek Oji by Akwaeke Emezi, an author who I have a tenuous relationship with. I really enjoyed Freshwater by them, and then I read You Made a Fool of Death with Your, whatever that romance was that they wrote, and despised that book. I think my review of it is one of my most liked reviews on Goodreads. It's quite nonsensical because I wrote it a few years ago. I'm interested in this one because my coworker really likes it and I trust her judgment. And so maybe this will be a redemption arc for Akwaeke Emezi. This is a story of an overprotective mother and a distant father, and the heart-wrenching tale of one family's struggle to understand their child, just as Vivek learns to recognize himself. They burned down the market on the day Vivek Oji died. A Meeting by the River by Christopher Isherwood. I don't really see much Isherwood at secondhand stores, so I was excited to find this because this is another author that's been referenced a lot by people I admire. Two brothers, Patrick, worldly, sexual, attired charmer, Oliver, desperate to believe true happiness comes the hard way through self-denial, honesty, and moral excellence. Oliver contacts Patrick, and 15 days before Oliver takes his final monastic vows, Patrick arrives at the monastery by the Ganges. After a break of 6 years, their relationship escalates as the deadline of initiation is approached until both are nearly mad and ready to abandon their beliefs. Immortality by Milan Kundera. I found this a week after finding The Unbearable Lightness of Being by him for $1 at a different op shop, obviously, because Savers loves to charge $5 for a water-damaged, falling apart novel. This breathtaking, reverberating survey of human nature finds Kundera still attempting to work out the meaning of life without losing his acute sense of humor. It is one of those great unclassifiable masterpieces that appear once every 20 years or so. Awesome, that tells me so much about what the book is about. I read Ignorance by Milan Kundera earlier this year, and it deals in exile and intimacy. I did find this vein of humor, lack of self-seriousness, that made for an intriguing element to Ignorance, which was about quite serious topics. And I do know there are some probably very valid criticisms of Kundera and his writing of women, so I'm curious to read more. Read some criticism. The Animals in That Country by Laura Jean McKay, a book I've been wanting to read for so long. I told you, a literary baddie must have died in my suburb. I said that with glee. That's evil of me. I hope they didn't. No, I'm sure they're fine. I'm sure they're safe and happy. I hope they've just, become a minimalist. No, I don't. I don't wish that upon anyone, not even my worst enemy. I am evil today. This follows a grandmother and her granddaughter as they set off on the road as a plague sweeps through the country, and the symptom of it is that humans begin to understand animals. Speculative, dystopian. I heard really good things about this. Anwen Crawford, no document. If you watched my other secondhand bookshop haul and tips, you'll know that Giramondo is a publisher I will just buy a book from, even if I don't know what it's about or haven't heard anything about it, because they publish super interesting stuff. This is a book-length essay that explores loss in its many forms, disappeared artworks, effaced histories, abandoned futures, written out of the turmoil of grief and the imperfection of memory. Her perspective embraces histories of protest and revolution, art making and cinema, border policing, and especially our relationship with animals. Ooh, bit of a theme. It seems to have a non-conventional layout, experimental, which excites me. Another book that's been on my radar is When I Sing Mountains Dance by Irene Sola. In fact, I ordered this into work, but it was only out in hardcover, and I don't really enjoy reading hardcovers, so I sadly put it back on the shelf. And then I find this, and this I think is a UK or US edition. It is set in the Pyrenean Mountains, and it follows a family. High in the Pyrenees, storm clouds swell, reckless, gleeful, and unbearably full, they release their bolts of lightning, striking a farmer named Dominic. He dies with poems on his lips and black chanterelles gathered in his shirt. The ghosts of 17th century witches come across his body and claim his chanterelles before going on their merry way. Like, hello? Hello? I'm super cheesed about this one. Last but certainly not least, the novel that inspired the album, of course, Brat, A Ghost Story by Gabriel Smith. It follows a writer named Gabriel. It's one of those fictionalized version of the author books, who's living in London and is tasked with cleaning out his deceased father's house. As he's sorting through the things in the house, he discovers a manuscript that seems to change with every read, and a script of a television show which is about an episode of television that seems to change with every watch. Also, his skin is falling off, like in sheets. It's all about grief and memory and written history. If you don't like the experimental, the meta, if you don't like pondering the multidimensional nature of the written word, this may not be for you. I would give this a miss, but I absolutely loved it. Oh, it's from the bookshop I worked at. When I was working there, I wonder if this was my recommendation. Did somebody take my recommendation, hate it, and give it to the op shop? Just as I planned. After much scouring of the web of rare book sites and despairing at shipping and import costs, I found on good old reliable Facebook Marketplace these Vampire Chronicles hardcovers. Eee! Now, are they rare books worth a lot of money? No. Are they particularly beautiful? No. Some of these are straight up ugly. Are they clean? No. They're sticky. A lot of them are covered in plastic that I had to just wipe years, probably decades worth of grime off of, but I love them because I'm really in my Interview with the Vampire era at the moment. Prettiest of the bunch is the anniversary edition of Interview with the Vampire. This is a reprint from 1999 and it's this gorgeous gold. It's got deckled edges, which is a super fun detail, and this really cutesy picture of Anne on the back. Look at us. We're queening out right now. I got Violin, which, if I recall, this one is sort of about Beethoven. He's not a vampire. That would be cool though if he was. Vampire Armand, look at that art. This is exactly what I wanted. I was actually looking for the paperbacks with like the cheesiest 80s, 90s art you can think of. So I'm really pleased with this one. He's got a little freaking hummingbird with a drop of blood across his eye. I love this silly guy. Servant of the Bones, these all came as a bundle, so I don't really care too much about this one. It's set in the same universe, but I don't even know if I ever read it. I think it's about Azrael. Knock the Devil, which is the 5th in the series. I think this one takes place in New York City from what I remember. Lestat, perfect vampire and eternal rebel, so gifted for evil yet so drawn by goodness, seeking constantly to justify the nature he abhors, making his most reckless challenge ever, to defy both God and the devil. He's always trying to do that. He's always freaking trying to do that. So I remember really liking this one. There's like a drug lord or something in it. It gets really strange. I mean, they're all really strange, and Rice was an interesting character. Obviously need the rest of the series now. I just don't think they were in circulation in Australia as much as in the US. Any Americans want to send me some? I know in her later books she refused to work with editors, so some of the names end up like misspelt. Oh, she's so silly. I want my house to be a library, basically. Books are so expensive in Australia. I'm lucky enough to have a staff discount, and I want friends to be able to come over and see things they want to read and take them and have them. And that's why I collect as much as I do. Also because, as I've said, I'm a maximalist, I'm a hedonist. Me want book, me like book, want book, ooga booga. And thanks for all of your engaged and insightful comments. I really enjoyed chatting. If you've read any of these books I mentioned, let me know what you thought. If there are any I should steer clear of. I'll see you next video. I'm thinking of doing a most anticipated releases of 2025 because there are some good books coming out and a lot I want to catch up on. So I might see you then. But thank you for subscribing if you have. If you haven't, that's so fair. If you didn't even make it to this point, that's so fair. I don't know how you're hearing this though. I'm in your walls. Okay, love you.